disadvantaged in Cambodia, and it now has 100 employees over through Laos and Kenya, ranked as a global top innovator and top 100 NGOs worldwide. He spent 15 years in the private sector before entering public service as a state senator in 2008, state auditor in 2015, and mayor in 2017. He's helped bring Netflix to Albuquerque with $1 billion coming to the community, as well as 1,000 jobs. Recent news of bringing NBC Universal Studios, generating more jobs and a substantial economic impact. And he's working diligently on safety, policing, and prosecuting, achieving great victories despite substantial legal and social challenges. He's a heavy metal enthusiast who can still throw a football as when he was quarterback. He's married to Elizabeth Keller, who spoke at our club 2 months ago on the subjects of community policing, the homelessness crisis, and community involvement. She is a Rhodes Scholar, now working at Sandia Labs, and they have 2 lovely children. We are very grateful for his leadership of our city. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Tim Keller. He's got his Rotary pin on.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here with all of you. And also, as those of you who enjoyed Liz when she came and spoke, she really appreciated it and enjoyed that, and looks forward to hopefully coming back at some point soon with some of the initiatives she's working on. Also, I tell the story a lot, so I'll keep it really short this time, but you know, I just got to harken back. I'm wearing my pin. One of you, I think, might have lent it or given it to me, but I was a Rotarian, a proud Rotarian for 3 years in Cambodia, of all places. And if you're curious about that after, you can ask me, but it was a fascinating group that the Rotary, instead of by profession, it was by country. So it was like, you know, an American and a Dane, and, you know, it was really cool. And Rotary International was there when we were there, so actually it was really cool. Got to meet the president, and it was very festive. So thank you for all that you do for Rotary and all you do for the community. It's really a special organization. I was proud to be a part of it for a couple of years. Now, what I'd like to do with you this afternoon is I'm going to try and save time for questions. I'll try and watch the clock, but I would like to cover a number of issues. So I'm going to try and give you a little bit of an update on a number of fronts, and then we'll have time for some of those hardball questions that I know some of you have ready for me. And firstly, you know, let me ask a question. How many of you have been to a New Mexico United game? A couple of folks, nice. That's actually more than I thought. That's great. Well, if you have, you're going to know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening with this, because actually I think it's a broader metaphor in many ways for our city. And so for me, if you go to these games, first off, let me tell you how we got the United. There's a group of investors. They wanted to have a professional soccer team, and some of them went to high school with Steve Bolton. And so it's a great group of folks from Santa Fe and Albuquerque. But lo and behold, they were like, well, where are we going to play? And I got this random meeting appointment, and it said, you know, Isotope Soccer. And so I show up, and I'm like, all right, what are we talking about? And they're like, you know, like, Mayor, don't say no before we explain this. You know, which is always, I know something bad's coming, you know. And they're like, we want almost $1 million to play soccer in Isotopes Park. And I was, of course, like, oh my gosh, here we go. Like, where do I get $1 million? Blah, blah, blah. But then they kind of told me about the thesis and what this team was about and the level of play that it's supposed to be. And then we actually worked with, believe it or not, at the city, the Isotopes have first right of refusal on everything. And so we worked it out. And so now I believe it is, and we got the price down too, so it's about $500,000, $500,000. It's one of the best $500,000 of your taxpayer money I think we've spent. And if you've been to a game, you know why. It is an unbelievable experience. What is so unbelievable about it is that I think first and foremost there's an intensity where everyone is actually interested in the game. And, you know, we don't always get that at our sporting events. And it's also folks from all walks of life. I mean, it really is like a snapshot of our city in every way. And if you hadn't heard, by the way, they're selling out now every game. So they sell out 15,000 folks in Isotopes Park. It is awesome to see. And that intensity is unbelievable. You can't even, like, you feel guilty going to get food. And, you know, lots of times it's kind of the reverse. Like, I'm like, well, it's time to get another drink or whatever, you know, because the game's going on too long. You never feel that at these games. It is a very powerful experience. It only reminds me of sometimes still at the pit, it's like a Lobo game, or, you know, I think in previous years, it has that feel, right, when you were standing up at the pit, like standing the entire game, clapping, cheering the team on. That is what this feels like. So number one, check it out if you can. It's a worthwhile experience for sure. But I think also what you see is our city coming together, and all of a sudden there's this shared hope and common cause that everyone has. And it is amazing how almost every person I've spoken to who's gone to one of these games says this. They're like, wow, it's so amazing that our community is rallying around something. And, you know, I recognize this is soccer. You know, I wish we could rally around a lot of other things. But, like, that experience is very, very powerful. And I think it's one that, unfortunately, a lot of us haven't experienced in a long time, whether it be for sports or a cause or something of that nature. And what it's really tapping into is pride in our community. It's people leave that game and they're like, wow, I felt like I was a part of something, and I'm proud of our city. I'm proud of our team, and I'm proud of everyone who was out there, you know, sort of together rooting us on. And that experience, ironically, is reflected in the name, which is a common name, but it's that concept of New Mexico United. This is exactly what it was designed to do, both for our city and for the team, and also financially, because the team is doing quite well when you sell out the stadium every time. We have the highest selling team in the league right now, which no one picked for an expansion team. And by the way, we play in a league with Phoenix and Salt Lake and some other teams, so it's not, you know, it's not us versus Lubbock. Like, we have some stiff competition when it comes to big cities on this. But this experience, I think, in many ways is reflective of some of the things that are happening in our city. We have been able, I hope, in the last year and a half or so, to demonstrate what it means when we are united in many ways as civic leaders, even as volunteers, even as elected officials, and we can actually get some things done. And to me, the speed with which and the size with which we've been able to do a couple of things is very much like those soccer games, if you think about it a little bit. And I know Bert touched on some of these, but when you reflect on what we've done, in some ways it's a glimpse in what we can accomplish as a city if we are actually aligned in our priorities, in our goals, and we're rallying behind a particular cause. And so, first and foremost, an example of that was last Friday. You know, the Netflix-NBC combination, when you put those two things together, it's 2,000 jobs, over $50,000 plus salaries, and $1.5 billion of investment into our economy in 10 years. This is approaching, not quite as big, it is approaching Intel-level investment into our community. These, I think, now are at a level where they will transform what it is like to grow up in Albuquerque. We will all know individuals who are working in the film industry. That's how big a deal this is. Now, for us, this doesn't come about, you know, randomly, as you can imagine. And the amazing thing is, after Netflix, the phone started to ring almost right away. And the amazing thing is, even the individual involved, a woman, Alicia Keys, who used to be our head of the film office and is now our Secretary of Economic Development, you know, this was literally a conversation she was having with Netflix about filming locations that then led to a studio. And then a couple of weeks after, it was a conversation with another studio, with NBC, saying, wow, you guys got Netflix? Like, the whole country is shocked because you beat out Denver and all these other cities. And they were kind of like, what are we missing? This is what NBC said. And she was like, well, let me tell you. And then we also said, look, we are interested in redevelopment. We want to take an old warehouse in an area of town that's underinvested in, and we want that to be the studio. We don't want another, you know, out in sort of outside of town setup. We want to bring this into the heart of the city to generate that economic development. And so it took us a while to put that deal together, but believe it or not, the seeds of that deal were planted the week after Netflix. But what it took, behind the scenes, right, you've got a council vote tonight on the NBC deal. You have a governor who put in 2/3 of the money to make that happen. And by the way, that spanned both administrations. We set this up under the previous administration and the current administration. And it also involved, you know, in many ways, the industry folks who work in this, also, you know, calling up the various producers and directors and saying, look, this town is a good place to do business in. And then they have to believe in the vision of Albuquerque. Companies like Netflix and NBC do not invest in like one-off towns that they don't think are stable or good for business. And so I think these are massive signals we are sending to the rest of the country of what we can do when we are united together in a purpose, in this case, for economic development around an industry that, whether we're really into it or not, the reality is, we always talk about diversifying the economy. We are now going to be all about defense, which is great. It's where my wife works too. And so absolutely respect that. We obviously have a good public sector and some other things going on, but we are already now #1 per capita in filming in the country. So welcome to a now 3-legged stool of the economy instead of 2-legged. But we're getting there, and I think it's important that we've got a new winner. We've got a new team, a new sport in town that we are good at, and that's film and media. Now, a couple of other things that I want to touch on in terms of what happens when we can work together. You know, I don't want to go into kind of what it's like to be a mayor and deal with city council, but I'll let you know we passed a budget 9-0. That almost never happens. So letting you know we are dancing to the same tune with city council. That doesn't mean we don't disagree all the time, but on those big issues like our bond issue and on our budget, council is with us, and I want to explain a little bit about what that means for each of you in the election coming up in November. But before I share that, I do want to mention our beloved art project. You know, this one I think is an example of, for better or worse, in many ways, us uniting around the fact that we've got to get this up and running and we've got to give it a shot. And that's what we're committed to, and I know we were able to do that through, you know, the courts and the legal system and what we had to do to get a different bus vendor. We were able to do that with the transit department, or the Department of Transportation at the state level. And we've been able to get all these partners together to essentially set this up so we can actually start running in the winter. And right now we believe that's going to happen. And so this is an example of a lot of folks working together behind the scenes to make this work. And I think in many ways, hopefully the community being patient, and in that sense being united and saying, okay, I would rather have it done right, or rather have it done as best that we can, than, you know, deal with all the issues we were facing with the old buses and things like this. So we are on solid footing for that. And the other thing that I want to share today is when I was here with you last, I had to make a really tough decision when I first came into office about law enforcement. And I mentioned that we have an officer shortage. We've been 400 officers short for at least a decade. When I was growing up here, we had 1,128 officers. When I came in, we had 847. Not to mention crime going way up. And so I said we have to get 400 more officers. The only way to do that is about 100 a year. And today we are announcing that we actually have met that goal. We have our 100th officer is hitting the streets today. That is a great thing across a number of fronts. And thank you. That is a very good thing to accomplish. And that for us, it relieves stress in a number of areas because the existing officers can become specialists. We can do more with Officer DeBuck, who's here today, and his mounted patrol. We can do a whole lot more, push a whole lot more people into detectives, into crimes against children, into bike cops, all these specialty things. And we're going to keep doing that. And so we obviously that's costing us funds, but it's the right investment for our community. And so we're on target for that. And that in many ways was, I think, a collective example of unity between City Council, between our office, between APD, and also in many ways, all of you for giving me the chance and the financial wherewithal to actually make that happen. So we got a long ways to go. We got 300 more to do, but these, I think, are examples of meaningful changes when we are working together. Now, One other thing I've noticed when I go to a United game is sometimes the team falls apart. those of you who've been to a game see this. They're not the most consistent team. And this, though, I think is in many ways, of course, just like us. And so I want to highlight areas where we have to come together, and we're not right now. One of them is, and there's also learning for me, and we'll stick on law enforcement. We have this deep challenge with overtime in our department, in our city. And it's very complex. It has to do with the fact that because we've had a shortage, we compensated for that by paying a bunch of overtime. But then we have officers who might be working so much overtime that it might be counterproductive for some of their duties when they're working the sort of standard hours. We also have situations we found out where folks were, I think, somewhat taking advantage of the overtime rules. And then we have this thing called Chiefs overtime, which if you want to pay for more overtime, you can just get it. You just have to pay us for it. But those weren't necessarily corroborated with the time they were supposed to be doing, so we had this kind of double dipping issue. And I would just tell you, our city was losing millions of dollars in overtime. We also have a situation where, at least until recently, our officers, I believe, were vastly underpaid. I think we've corrected that now, so they would work overtime to provide for their families and so forth. But I'm letting you know that this continues. You will see this in the paper, at least for the next 6 months, as we work to correct this. And there will be folks on both sides, saying, well, they're taking away our overtime, or no, we need more overtime, and how do we do this? But right now, we have not hit an overtime budget in 8 years. We blow right through it. And then, of course, we have the real policing challenges that we have, that we've got to fund. So I'm just highlighting for you, these are areas where we're working hard, and we've got the answer, we've got the right direction, but it's going to be a longer road before we can straighten this one out. The Balloon Fiesta, interestingly, one of our most treasured entities. If I don't know how many of you actually go to the Balloon Fiesta on a weekend anymore, but I tried to this year. It's almost impossible, right? The traffic is so bad. And if this is a case, we're just a victim of our own success. I mean, this is one of the best things we do, and it's awesome, and it's been awesome for a long time. But if you're in from out of town for a weekend, and you're sitting in traffic for 4 hours, that's not going to work. And so it turns out we have not updated how we do the Balloon Fiesta in a decade. Whether it's with traffic, or whether it's with ticketing, or whether it's with parking, whether it's with park and ride. The other thing is now park and ride is so slammed, you've got to wait to get on park and ride. So as you can see, we've got a long way to go on this. And I will tell you, there's disagreement already among neighborhoods about what changes, whether or not we want to use the rail runner. Is that viable? Should we do that? Shouldn't we do that? All of these are things you're going to hear about in the fall, where I am going to do the best that I can to bring us together around an answer, to unite us around some answers. But I know it's going to be a challenge, because right now we are not aligned on that, and there are different government entities involved. There's the state and the county and the Balloon Fiesta Board, and right now we don't all agree. But that's okay. We've got some time. And also, we're going to put some things on the bond issue before you that I think will help clarify this. But there's some smaller things too, where it's a daily challenge to bring folks together. We had our homelessness challenge. We see this throughout this issue. But I want to tell you one story now that we're finished with lunch. We wanted to put restrooms at some of these places where all these folks were because of public health reasons and solid waste reasons and so forth. But then we did that, and then of course there was drug use in the restrooms, and there were other things going on in the restrooms, and then we have a civil rights violation when we want to remove the restrooms. This is kind of a day in the life of being mayor right now, but this Coronado Park porta potty issue, we are nowhere near united on that thing. And so some of these we've had a little bit better success with, and I'll share with you one more. Scooters. Anyone ridden a scooter? Couple. They're really fun, they're really fast, so you gotta be careful, I will tell you. I saw these in other towns, and these scooters are everywhere, and they're almost like litter. They're like vehicular litter. And they're in the roadway, and wheelchairs are trying to make their way around them. And so we made a decision that we were gonna have, there was one camp is we can't have scooters. And of course, all the lawyers are like, this is a risk management disaster. So I hope that's not your latest practice. So that was a huge issue. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, scooters are fun. Every city has them. Why can't we try this, right? Why can't Albuquerque also be fun and try new things? So, this one, I hope we're getting it right. I think we're a little bit more united. What we did is we regulate them more than any other city. So the irony is we are using a very heavy-handed regulation regime for these in terms of how they're picked up and where they're placed and the fines that we fine the companies. When we announced this, all the scooter companies were like, well, we don't want to do it. They're like, you're not serious about scooters because these regulations are too strong. 1 month later, we had scooters. So, knock on wood, hopefully we're getting this one right. But these are just some examples that I think we're facing that are open-ended challenges. And it brings me to, I think, the road ahead for us, at least in the short term as a city. We have seen that when we come together, we can do big things. And I also want to mention that when I say us uniting, it means our state, it means our governor and our legislature. But for the first time, and again, as long as folks can remember, we had a different message at the Roundhouse. And those of you who've kind of noticed mayoral and gubernatorial politics and stuff over the years, usually it went like this. Either Albuquerque would roll up to the Roundhouse and be like, we're the biggest city in the state, and you got to do X, Y, and Z, and political pressure was applied. Or it was like, Roundhouse, it's their show, we'll take care of our business, let them take care of their business, and never the two shall cross. Well, neither of those strategies are what we need right now. Our challenges are so great, I need all the help I can get. And so I went in with a very different message. It was more about pleading and begging for help. And it was from a place of humility, also quietly. I used to be a state senator, so I know a little bit how that system works. And so we went up there also with our homework done. So I had a laundry list of $300 million worth of requests. Historically, we get 20 million. And everyone's like, that's huge, we'll never get that, and all this. And I knew we weren't going to get 300 million. But we got $70 million from Santa Fe. That is twice as much as we've ever gotten in the history of our city. And for those of us who are taxpayers in Albuquerque, this in some ways actually is the rest of the state subsidizing us. And I'm okay with that. We need the help. And we all know the rest of the state shops here, they fly out of here, their kids go to school here, they all use our hospitals. So I made that argument too. I actually asked legislators from around the state to step up for Albuquerque for a change. And at first they were just like, what are you talking about? I got to take care of my town. But that's changed. And I think unfortunately for some reasons it's changed because our needs are so great. That's one. But I think it's also changed because there is an acknowledgement. The reality is that in 1,000 square miles, there is one place where you can get on a plane, where you can get your health care that is specialty designed, where your kids can go to a full-scale research university. It is Albuquerque. So there's also this acknowledgement that, whether we like it or not, you got to take care of your urban center. That's what New Mexico has to do, just like Illinois has to take care of Chicago in some ways. You see these dynamics in other states. And so hopefully this is going to help. And so number one, it helped us do a whole lot when it came to infrastructure for our law enforcement. Believe it or not, our city officers were not able to talk to any other officers outside the city on their radios. And now, $38 million later, we're going to be able to talk to each other. But this is a big deal, especially when it comes to things like mass shootings and all the kinds of stuff we don't like to think about where it's multi-jurisdictional. Also, it means that we got some funding to fix up the balloon fiesta. So we're going to try and have some additional parking. We're going to try and have a couple of different ways in and out. And we may try and look at, during the balloon fiesta, a rail runner service that you can walk off the train and walk to the fiesta. So these are all things we can do with state money. The rail yards too, we now have fully funded remediation to activate that property thanks to everyone at the state. And so we're in a much better place. So let me, I think, wrap it up with this. When it comes to uniting, we are going to need each other's help, I believe, when it comes to November. There is a ballot that'll be before you, and it'll be a ballot like none of us have ever seen. thanks to the state, this was something we were not really fans of. We're consolidating elections, in case you didn't know this or hear about this. So all of a sudden, school board and CNM and city elections and some other conservancy districts are all going to be on one ballot. And this thing also has all the bond issues. So it's got city, it's got APS, it's got CNM, and you know, it seems like a 4-page ballot. And this thing is a monster if our community is not used to it. Also, for good or bad, for the first time, the CNM board election and the APS board elections are going to have like a third of the city voting, and they usually have like 2% voting. So you will see there's going to be a lot of hullabaloo about this for a lot of good reasons, actually. But inside that that ballot is going to be a couple of things. Number one, there's elections and all that. Two, there's going to be some cleanup language to get us in accordance with this new election law. So we're going to do elections now in November. In the city we do them in October, all this stuff. So you're going to see a lot of language about that. You're going to see a renewal, emphasis on renewal, underline heavily, renewal of a transportation tax that we've had for several decades that goes up for renewal every 10 years. It's not a new tax. And then you're going to see our bond issues. And our bond issues are different this year. They include a couple of big priorities that I believe we need. The biggest one being a center to get our homeless folks the help they need. It is the concept of taking this old jail on the west side and figuring out how we do that in a place so that we don't have folks living on our streets. And so there is money in there for that, and there's money for housing vouchers, which is the highest return on investment, the cheapest way to actually get someone the help that they need. Now, there's also fixing up the balloon fiesta, there's also fixing up the rail yards, and then there's all the parks and stop signs and roads and all that other stuff that we always do. But there is some major stuff on that. And I will tell you, unless that bond issue passes, it's going to be very hard to continue the kind of progress that we've been making in these areas. And that center is really important because that's where we want to put all the drug addiction treatment in there. So it's heavily correlated to law enforcement too. We know the biggest driver of crime in our community is addiction. And so for any segment we can provide help for, and we're doing this with an MOU with UNMH, we've got to do this together. It's something we should have done decades ago, and now we just got to bite the bullet and do it like every other city in America has. So I don't want to go too much further on that, but there's $128 million also of construction jobs. And so all of this does equal roughly about 1,500 construction jobs and a lot of construction and development in our city, even for small things like repaving roads and so forth. So I would ask for your support on that, and there's lots more on that, but there's tons of noise on the ballot. So I would just say, let's have an active discussion, let's have a good vote, but there's going to be a lot to talk about when it comes to November. So let me wrap up with this. For me, as I think about the road ahead, I think it's also important to take time to celebrate. After a game like a United game or a Good Lobo game, we're all so happy and we feel good about ourselves. And I will tell you the last few days, finally getting our art bus, getting NBC Universal, getting 100 cops on the street, and the senior games kicking off without a hitch, these are reasons to celebrate. This is Albuquerque at our best. This is what we can do when we're united. We also know we've got to celebrate the reality that we have many challenges ahead of us. And I know that as happy as I was to see those things happen, an hour later I'm back to work on the next thing. And we know we have a long road to go. And it's going to take dedication. It's going to take resolve that we actually can achieve our potential. It's going to take patience. It's going to take disagreeing with each other. But hopefully at a minimum, we should move forward. And we should say that we believe in a better Albuquerque. We believe in a place that has more potential today than we see around us. If we can believe in that and keep trying to push that ball forward, I believe this will be the Albuquerque we know it can be. And I would appreciate all of your help in that process as we go down that road together. So with that, thank you so much, and we might have time for questions.
Questions?
You call it out.
Jeff?
Hi, I'm a visiting Rotarian from Concord, New Hampshire, and I just want to thank you.
Wait, hang on one second.
Hello, I'm Dick Johnson. I'm a visiting Rotarian and athletes, elderly. in the
Nice. Thanks for participating.
city for hosting it. Thank you very much. And I'm so happy to see so many of you at Rotary. I'm a member of the little Catholic City Rotary Club in Concord, New Hampshire, and part-time member of the bigger one. But we're having some trouble up there, and I'm so happy to see that you are increasing your membership. Great bunch of people, and thanks once again. There's so much I could say about the senior games, and we don't have time.
Thank you.
We're playing 3-on-3 basketball. I think if we take away the wheelchairs of the other team,
You're doing just fine.
I love it, and just know and tell your friends we want you to stay longer, we want you to come back, and you can move here too.
Hey, Mayor Keller, thank you for the great job you're doing. And since you brought up the subject of traffic in this town, which is a sore subject for a lot of us, most importantly, that concrete abomination that runs down the middle of Central Avenue and takes out two full lanes. Secondly, the gas guzzling dinosaurs that roam our part of the planet here, called 60 and 120 feet long buses with a limo tint on the windows you can't see through and advertisements you can't see through. Part of that helps keep them cool inside, and part of it keeps us taxpayers from seeing there's no more than 2 or 3 people on the bus, if any. I've ridden a bus with this, being the bus driver, being the only breathing occupants there. And if we would sell those buses, make some money on them, and buy a small shuttle, 15, 20 person shuttle buses, we could save tax, insurance, and training time for the drivers. So, does anybody else agree with me?
Well, thank you for that. Let me just touch on it so we can get to some more questions. But look, your point just about the dinosaur buses is true. We are replacing the fleet. We actually want to move to electric and hybrid, so that's the plan. We're going to try and do that also with our trash trucks and our city fleet. The technology, as we found with the large ART buses, isn't quite there for high altitude and valleys. So it's like a golf cart. If you're in a high mountain course with a bunch of hills, they never use battery golf carts because it drains the battery. It's actually very similar. So just letting you know, that's on the horizon. We weren't quite ready for it yet. And the new ART buses, I have decided that we are not going to advertise on them. We're going to use them as a celebration of hopefully a project that is going to get more riders on the bus. So thank you for that. We're still going to advertise on the short ones, but that'll be at least a little bit of improvement. And the last thing on that I do just want to mention is once we get it up and running, there is an opportunity, which for a price, we are going to look at the route and we're going to see, is this working, is it not? But I will tell you, we've got to get it up and running for at least 6 months because of all the federal money that we got. So, people are wondering, like, are you going to do this different, or what are you going to do with the platform? We got to be pragmatic on this. Let's get it up and running, and then we will evaluate and see what kind of improvements we can make.
Mayor Keller, I hate to bring up the subject of panhandling, but when people are in the medians, they are a definite traffic hazard. And I just came back from Phoenix, and they are enforcing a law that says you can panhandle from the sides, but not the medians. Can't we do something like that? It is so dangerous.
Appreciate you mentioning that, and it is. Here's, I think, we're thinking along the same lines. So right now in our city, this is, I think, something that we should try and do. And I've actually already. We're in the preliminary phase of working on this. I will let you know, though, we are in the middle of a lawsuit on this that stems back to the panhandling ordinance from the previous administration. And all parties agreed to settle that, like what the rules are of the game through the courts, and then we will enforce every piece that we can enforce. We are waiting on the judge. We're hoping this fall that we can actually do that. So I would say kind of stay tuned, because we're going to do whatever we can legally. Unfortunately, until then, we're not able to. But I hope next time when I come visit you, we'll have made some progress on that front.
Any other questions? Over here. Over there.
My question has to do around corporate welfare. You know, there was a really big movement towards, you know, organizations like Amazon, and I think, you know, Netflix coming into town is really good. But I wanted to know if you have any plans on investing more in local businesses, small businesses, and encouraging that kind of growth, as opposed to kind of use your own words, kind of latch onto a unicorn.
Nice. Well, and as folks know, you know, some of you who might have followed a little bit of my career, I ran a ton of legislation on this. This was a real kind of pet issue of mine in the legislature and in the auditor's office. The amount of money that certain folks get to do business and the lack of availability of that for others is a very important issue. So let me, I think, try and succinctly address your question with two quick stories. One, there was this company called TaskUs that hopefully is still coming downtown, and they wanted a lot of incentives. It's a type of call center, but kind of a high-end fun one. And you know, we put together a package that we felt was you know, at least a positive return on investment. In other words, we're giving them up some, but we did the jobs and the economic impact, and we think we're getting more than we're giving. So we're comfortable with that. There was another company called LSI, and they're moving in just right next to the Hyatt. And we kept trying to put together the same package, and they weren't interested. All they wanted, literally, this was their words, not mine, was city leadership, and that was meant in general, although I took it as a compliment. They wanted city leadership they believed in. And they said no to the incentives. Can you believe that? And it was a 2.5-year courtship. And then they're like, yeah, now keep we don't want your $500,000 with all these strings attached, you know. And that was a really, I think, important lesson, that it's also okay to just sell who we are. And it's okay to say no to companies who are trying to extract too much. And without going into a longer debate, because I think we touched on it even when I was here last time, this was the issue with Topgolf versus this film stuff. You know, I felt that project was pushing up against that corporate welfare return on investment line, and so I wasn't comfortable with it. Now, I will mention on the film front, the subsidies, as you all know, are very, very generous. And I think that the way we're working, the accountability, the strings attached, hopefully are providing in, you know, like right now, if NBC leaves or they don't meet their targets, we actually claw back the same percentage of money we've given them. So I feel comfortable with that, but it's something that we really had to negotiate. Like, there's a reason why the deal took 9 months to put together, and most of it was us trying to give only 1 penny more than we had to, or not a penny more than we had to. And so I think those are okay. And when the numbers, you know, for me, if we're putting in as a city $3 million, for example, and we're getting $500 million in investment and 1,000 jobs, I think that math works okay. But I want you to know I'm very sensitive to that math, and that's why I've gone on record voting against some very popular projects, vetoing popular projects because of that issue. So I appreciate your question.
Okay, I think the mayor's time is valuable.
One more question. Sir, thank you very much for your support.
So please make it short.
Yes, sir.
And, thank you for joining us. Let's make maybe a good question.
I mean, that's a prerequisite. I wanted to thank you for giving support to one of Albuquerque's silent treasures that half of these people are not aware of, the Wheels Museum. And I want to thank you very much. And it is, half of you don't even know of its existence.
Ron, we had a presentation on it, so we're up.
Good. Come Sundays. I want to give you a private tour, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So we have, instead of our hourglass, which we gave you already, we have our Rotary Club of Albuquerque run. So thank you very much, Mayor Keller.